All creation begins within. The world you see around you, the circumstances you face, and the experiences that unfold are all reflections of what has been impressed upon your imagination. To understand this truth is to realize that you are not at the mercy of chance, nor are you bound by the limitations others try to place upon you. The very substance of reality is formed and molded by the images and feelings you hold inside. When you imagine, you are not merely daydreaming or entertaining idle thoughts. You are shaping the very blueprint of your future. This is why imagination creates reality. It is not a poetic saying, but the very law by which life operates. Every building, every invention, every work of art, every discovery, and even the small events of daily life began first in the unseen realm of thought. Consider the simplest example. Before a house is built, an architect designs it. The drawing exists before the structure does. The vision precedes the manifestation. If the design changes on paper, the final building changes in stone. The same principle operates in every area of life. The image you carry within yourself is the sketch, and your lived reality is the construction. Nothing comes into being without first being imagined. What is true for bricks and mortar is also true for relationships, health, wealth, and every human experience. To act as if you are wealthy begins in this inner realm of imagination. You see yourself as one already possessing, and by that assumption you are creating the mold from which the visible world must emerge. We often deceive ourselves by thinking imagination is insignificant, that it is a private play of the mind with no power to influence the external world. Yet every external event can be traced back to an inner cause. If you look at your life honestly, you will see that your persistent inner conversations, your unspoken feelings, and your dominant images have conspired to create the very conditions you now call reality. The problem is never the outer world. The problem is always the unnoticed assumptions you have allowed to settle within you. If you hold an inner picture of limitation, your outer world will faithfully echo it. If you entertain feelings of lack, you will encounter shortage again and again. But if you dare to imagine wealth, not in the far-off future but as your present state, then wealth must, in due season, unfold around you. This is the reason why acting as if you are wealthy is not about forcing appearances in the outer world. It is about saturating your imagination with the conviction that you already are. To think of wealth is not enough. You must think from it. To think of wealth is to place it outside yourself, as something you might one day attain. To think from wealth is to assume the position now, to inhabit the state fully, and to view life from the perspective of one who already has. This is the subtle but decisive difference that separates daydreaming from creation. When you think from the end, you shift your inner position, and the world must mirror it back to you. Imagination does not operate in the future tense. It only knows now. When you imagine, you are planting a seed in the present moment. If you continually sow the seed of wealth in imagination, you must reap wealth in the visible world. Just as surely as the seed of an oak tree cannot produce a rose, the seed of wealth cannot produce poverty. The seed reproduces after its kind. If you want to change the harvest, you must change the seed. It is not something that might happen. It is happening continually. Whether you realize it or not, you are always imagining. You are always creating. The only question is whether you are doing it consciously or unconsciously. To act as if you are wealthy does not mean you walk about pretending in the outer world. Pretending in the sense of forced performance will never convince the deeper self. True assumption is not about outward gestures. It is about inward feeling. Feeling is the secret. The universe responds not to empty words, but to the vibrational tone of your inner state. You can affirm wealth 1,000 times, but if you continue to feel poor, the affirmation will be hollow. The feeling is what imprints the imagination, and the imagination is what shapes reality. When you allow yourself to feel the reality of wealth within, you align your inner world with the state you desire. This is not about forcing emotion, but about quietly assuming the mood that would be natural. If you were already living your wish fulfilled, ask yourself, if I truly were wealthy now, how would I feel? Would I feel relieved? Would I feel secure? Would I feel grateful? Would I feel free? Let those feelings rise up within you as if they are already true. When you clothe yourself in that inner atmosphere, you are living from the state of wealth, and the outer world must eventually reflect it. Think of it this way. If an actor prepares for a role, he does not merely recite lines. He enters the feeling of the character. He imagines the character's inner world until it becomes real to him. On stage, he lives as if he truly is the character, and the audience believes it because the performance is infused with genuine feeling. In the same way, You must become the actor of your own inner drama. You must live inwardly as if you are already wealthy. The more real the feeling becomes to you, the faster the outer world will conform. Many people stumble here because they attempt to imagine without feeling. They create lovely mental pictures of a new home, a new car, a life of freedom, but they remain cold to their own images. They stand outside them as spectators rather than participants. The secret is to enter the scene until you feel the thrill of possession, the joy of abundance, the natural ease of having more than enough. When the scene feels real enough to evoke genuine emotion, you have impressed it upon the subconscious. The subconscious does not argue, it accepts feeling as fact. Once accepted, it sets in motion the unseen currents that bring about the fulfillment. Feeling is not limited to joy or excitement. Even a quiet sense of relief, the subtle satisfaction of knowing it is already done, is more powerful than endless repetition of words without conviction. If you can reach the place where you simply rest in the assurance of wealth, where you feel it as natural as breathing, then you have aligned yourself with the state. This naturalness is the true test. If wealth feels forced or unnatural, you are still striving. When wealth feels normal and obvious, you are living from it. Notice how often in daily life people reinforce poverty through their feelings. They look at a bill and feel dread. They think of money and feel anxiety. They discuss opportunities and feel unworthy. Each of these feelings is an instruction to the subconscious to reproduce more of the same. If instead, in the face of the same circumstances, you assume the inner mood of wealth, you are giving the opposite instruction. You are telling the subconscious that abundance is natural, that prosperity is already yours, and the subconscious will comply. You may wonder how long it takes for the outer world to reflect the new state. The answer is simple. It takes as long as it takes for you to accept the feeling as fact. The delay is not in the law but in your acceptance. Some changes are immediate, others require persistence, but in all cases the law is certain. Once the feeling of wealth is sustained within you, the corresponding events must appear. The bridge of incidents will unfold, often in ways you could never predict. Opportunities will arise, people will appear, doors will open, and circumstances will align. But the root of it all will be the feeling you chose to assume within. This is why gratitude is such a powerful aid to the process. Gratitude allows you to feel as though you have already received. When you give thanks in advance, you align yourself with the state of fulfillment. The very act of gratitude shifts your feeling from lack to abundance. It tells the subconscious that wealth is present, not absent. It transforms your imagination into a fertile soil in which the seed of wealth can grow. To act as if you are wealthy is therefore to walk in continual gratitude, knowing within yourself that what you assume must be given expression. To practice this, take a simple scene that implies wealth. It might be checking your bank balance and seeing more than enough. It might be treating a friend to dinner without hesitation. It might be living in a home you love and feeling at ease within it. Enter this scene in imagination and remain there until the feeling of wealth rises naturally. Do not strain. Do not force. Simply inhabit the scene until it feels real. Then carry that feeling into your waking hours as if it is already true. This is how you act as if, not through empty pretending, but through deep inward acceptance. Once you understand that imagination creates reality and that feeling is the secret, the rest follows naturally. You no longer chase wealth as something external. You no longer beg or struggle or hope desperately. Instead, you become still and assume the state within. You act as if you are already wealthy by dwelling in the mood of abundance, by thinking from wealth rather than about it, and by feeling the truth of your assumption until it becomes natural. When this inner work is done faithfully, the outer world will bow to your inner vision, and what was once unseen will become the substance of your daily life. The law of assumption is one of the most powerful truths you can ever come to understand. It declares that you do not attract what you want, but what you assume to be true. Life mirrors back to you not your desires or wishes, but your settled beliefs and assumptions. If you wish to experience wealth, health, love, or success, you must first take up the assumption that these things are already yours. To assume is to claim it inwardly, to walk in the conviction that what you desire is not on its way, but has already arrived. This is the secret behind living as if. It is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. Most people live in the state of hoping. They wish that one day things might change. They desire wealth but continue to assume poverty. They want success but inwardly carry the assumption of failure. They say they want freedom, yet every thought they entertain is chained by doubt and fear. The law of assumption works unfailingly, not according to what is spoken casually, but according to what is consistently believed within. If you assume lack, you will see lack. If you assume wealth, you will see wealth. The law has no favorites, no exceptions, no hesitations. It only reflects back to you what you accept as real. To assume wealth means to live inwardly from the position of one who already possesses it. It means to see through the eyes of abundance. Imagine for a moment that you already have everything you could possibly need. You are financially secure, free from anxiety, and capable of giving generously. How would you walk into a room? How would you carry yourself? How would you approach opportunities? The law of assumption asks you to take up these answers now, not when the money arrives. It insists that you begin with the end in mind and dwell there until it feels natural. Once you sustain that inner state, the outer world cannot help but reshape itself in harmony with your assumption. This is why assumption is stronger than effort. You do not need to force the outer world or manipulate circumstances to match your desires. When you assume wealth inwardly, you automatically move into the position where opportunities, ideas, and people align to fulfill it. You may call it coincidence, fate, or providence, but it is simply the law in operation. Your assumption rearranges the invisible structure of reality and sets in motion a chain of events that lead you to the fulfillment of your state. Assumption is a living seed. If planted in the soil of your subconscious with feeling, it must bear fruit. The timing may vary, but the harvest is certain. Think of how a seed knows exactly what to become. You do not plant an acorn and expect an apple tree. The assumption of wealth cannot bring poverty. The assumption of freedom cannot produce bondage. The outer results always mirror the inner state. For this reason, it is useless to complain about conditions. Conditions are only the shadows cast by yesterday's assumptions. If you want to change the shadow, you must change the light within. The difficulty most people face is that they refuse to persist in their new assumption. They affirm wealth for a few days, but when the outer world shows no immediate change, they fall back into old habits of doubt. They allow the senses to dictate the truth instead of the imagination. The law of assumption requires persistence. You must cling to the end as though it were already here. You must continue to assume, even in the face of contradictory evidence, until your new state feels natural. When it feels natural, it will soon appear. Now consider the deeper truth about wealth itself. Many believe wealth is a number in the bank or a collection of possessions. But true wealth is not a figure written on a statement. True wealth is an attitude of mind, a state of consciousness. A man may have millions and yet live in fear of losing it, counting every coin and resenting every expense. Such a man is poor in spirit, no matter the size of his fortune. Another may hold little in hand, but carry the conviction that he is secure, provided for, and capable of creating more whenever needed. That man is wealthy, for his consciousness is aligned with abundance. Wealth is not measured by what you hold, but by how you feel about what you hold. It is not the possession but the awareness that matters. A poor consciousness surrounded by riches will still experience poverty, for it cannot see or enjoy what it has. A wealthy consciousness will turn even the smallest resources into greater supply, because it operates from the inner certainty of abundance. This is why changing the outer alone will never be enough. Without changing the inner state, the outer conditions may improve for a time, but they will eventually collapse back into the level of your consciousness. Look at the stories of lottery winners who receive sudden wealth only to lose it within a few years. Why does this happen? The money changed, but the consciousness did not. They carried into their fortune the same assumptions of lack, fear, and limitation. As a result, the wealth slipped through their fingers, and they returned to the state that matched their inner belief. Wealth is not safe until it is natural. Unless you change your consciousness, no outer improvement can last. On the other hand, consider the person who seems always to land on their feet. No matter what setbacks they face, they always recover, rebuild, and rise again. What is their secret? They carry the consciousness of wealth. They assume abundance as natural, so even when conditions fall away, the inner state produces new opportunities. This is why wealth is an attitude, not a bank account. When you assume the inner state of abundance, the external must follow. This truth invites you to examine the assumptions you live by each day. Do you assume bills are a burden? Or do you assume they are easily paid? Do you assume money is scarce? Or do you assume it flows continually? Do you assume opportunities are rare? Or do you assume they are abundant? Every assumption you hold becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you do not like the life you see, trace it back to the assumptions you carry and replace them. The practice is simple yet profound. Begin by identifying the state you wish to live in. Let us say it is wealth. Then ask yourself, if I were truly wealthy right now, what would I feel? What would my inner conversations sound like? What mood would I carry? Then take on those feelings and conversations within yourself until they become familiar. Do this not once but again and again until the state of wealth feels more real than the state of lack. This repetition implants the assumption deep in the subconscious, where it works without effort to bring itself forth. At first, this may feel strange. The old assumption of lack will resist and try to reassert itself. But with persistence, the new assumption will take root. Eventually, you will no longer be pretending. You will genuinely feel wealthy, even if the outer world has not yet caught up. When the feeling of wealth becomes natural within, the outer world must conform. The law has no choice. To live from wealth is to carry yourself differently, to speak differently, to think differently. You may still face the same outward circumstances at first, but your relationship to them will have changed. The bill no longer feels threatening, for you assume you have more than enough. The opportunity no longer feels intimidating, for you assume you are capable and deserving. The small expense no longer feels heavy, for you assume abundance replenishes itself. These shifts in attitude are not minor. They are the seeds of transformation. They signal to the subconscious that wealth is the reality, and in time the outer world will reflect it. Wealth as a state of consciousness also frees you from the endless chase. So many exhaust themselves pursuing more, never realizing that until they assume abundance within, no amount of accumulation will satisfy. When you live in the consciousness of wealth, you no longer strive anxiously. You give freely, you act boldly, and you enjoy what you have now. This relaxed certainty invites more into your life without effort. The paradox is that when you stop grasping for wealth from a place of lack, and instead assume it from within, you create the conditions for greater outward wealth than ever before. The law of assumption and the recognition that wealth is a state of consciousness are inseparable truths. They work together as cause and effect. To assume is to occupy the state inwardly. To understand wealth as an attitude is to know what state to occupy. When you bring them together, you discover the secret of acting as if. You realize you need not wait for the outer world to change before you change your assumption. You realize wealth begins within and must be claimed there first. From that inner claim, all else flows naturally. What you continually whisper to yourself when no one else is around shapes the world you walk through each day. Inner speech is the unseen architect of your reality. Most people imagine that their thoughts are private and carry little influence. Yet every conversation you rehearse within yourself impresses your subconscious with instructions. The words may never leave your lips, but the feeling carried in those words molds the conditions of your outer life. This is why inner speech is never idle. It is always creating, always planting, always shaping what is to come. If you want to know what tomorrow holds, listen carefully to what you are saying to yourself today. When you face a challenge, do you speak inwardly as a victim or as one who already has the answer? If you look at your finances, do you silently complain about lack? Or do you speak as one who has more than enough? Every time you repeat a phrase inside your mind, you are casting a spell over your future. The subconscious mind does not care whether the words are positive or negative, hopeful or fearful. It accepts them without judgment and brings them forth as fact. If you habitually tell yourself that money is scarce, opportunities are limited, or wealth is only for others, then you instruct your subconscious to construct that reality for you. Now imagine turning this law in your favor. Imagine filling your inner world with conversations of abundance. You pay a bill and hear yourself inwardly saying, "I always have plenty to cover this with ease." You look at an opportunity and whisper within, "I am more than capable of seizing this and succeeding." You desire a certain lifestyle and tell yourself in silence, "This is already mine. I am living it now." These quiet conversations begin to rewire your subconscious, and as they are repeated with feeling, they take root as your new reality. You are never merely thinking. You are scripting the stage upon which you will act tomorrow. Consider how often your inner talk is unconscious. You walk down the street, and someone passes you in a fine car. Do you mutter within, "That will never be me"? Or do you affirm, "Life provides me with all that I desire"? You open your wallet, and the amount seems small. Do you grumble inwardly, "I can never get ahead"? Or do you declare within yourself, "My supply is endless and always replenished"? The difference between these two inner dialogues is the difference between poverty and wealth, between struggle and ease. The external world is but the shadow of the words you continually rehearse inside. When you begin to monitor your inner speech, you will be astonished at how much of it contradicts the life you say you want. You might affirm wealth aloud for a few minutes each day, but if for the remaining hours your inner conversation is filled with worry, doubt, and lack, then the louder voice is what the subconscious obeys. Words spoken silently carry as much weight, and often more, than words spoken aloud. The discipline is not in forcing positive talk, but in gently redirecting your inner voice. Each time it strays, over time, this redirection becomes natural, and your inner world is saturated with the language of abundance. The quality of inner speech is not just in the words, but in the tone of those words. There is a difference between saying within, "I am wealthy," in a flat, mechanical way and saying it with a sense of relief, gratitude, and certainty. The subconscious listens to the feeling behind the words more than the words themselves. This is why two people can speak the same affirmation with entirely different outcomes. One speaks as if reciting empty lines. The other speaks as if stating a fact already lived. The latter is the one whose world transforms. Linked to this is the practice of gratitude. Gratitude has a mysterious power because it shifts your inner speech from the language of lack to the language of fulfillment. To give thanks before you see evidence is to act in the highest faith. It is to declare inwardly that what you desire already exists in unseen form and is only waiting to unfold. Gratitude before receiving is a form of inner speech that seals the assumption in the subconscious. It tells your deeper mind, "I already have this, and therefore there is nothing to strive for, nothing to chase." Many fail in their desires because they thank only after something arrives. They wait for the evidence before they feel the gratitude. But this is not creation. It is reaction. Creation requires that you move first within, that you give thanks for what is not yet visible. When you wake each day and say inwardly, "I am so thankful for the wealth that flows to me," you are not pretending. You are planting the seed of fulfillment. You are writing the script that life must soon act out. The subconscious accepts gratitude as proof of possession. To be grateful for wealth is to tell your deeper self that the wealth already exists, and so it must appear in the outer world. Think of a farmer who plants seeds in the ground. He does not wait for the harvest before feeling gratitude. He gives thanks at the planting, knowing that the harvest is certain. Gratitude is the same in your inner life. When you assume wealth and give thanks for it in advance, you rest in the certainty of its arrival. This attitude of thanksgiving is a quiet confidence that moves mountains and rearranges circumstances without struggle. Gratitude in advance is a sign that you are no longer begging life, but commanding it. You can practice this at any moment. The next time you handle money, instead of feeling anxiety, let gratitude rise within you. Thank the invisible supply for always replenishing itself. When you walk through your home, regardless of its size, thank the abundance that has provided it and imagine even greater space is already yours. When you think of your future, instead of fearing uncertainty, give thanks for the opportunities already unfolding. Each act of gratitude is a conversation with your subconscious, instructing it to produce more of what you are thankful for. Gratitude transforms inner speech from a tone of lack to a tone of wealth. A man who constantly says inwardly, "I need more, I lack, I hope something comes soon," will only perpetuate lack. Another who continually says inwardly, "I have more than enough, life is generous to me, my wealth is abundant," will see wealth multiply. The words may seem simple, but their repetition with feeling shapes destiny. You cannot escape the effect of your inner dialogue, for it is the silent decree from which reality takes its orders. To combine inner speech with gratitude is to wield the law with mastery. You speak within as though you already possess, and you give thanks as though it were already received. Together, these practices dissolve the old state of lack and establish the new state of abundance. The subconscious, once impressed, will gather the necessary means, circumstances, and opportunities to bring the inner speech to life. You may not know how it will happen, but the law will not fail. Inner speech is the cause, gratitude is the fuel, and the outer world is the effect. This is why those who live in constant complaint remain bound to the very conditions they dislike. Their inner speech is filled with dissatisfaction, and so life provides them with more reasons to complain. They may change their outer actions endlessly, working harder, chasing new schemes, but until the inner voice changes, the results remain the same. On the other hand, those who cultivate thankful inner conversations rise continually, often without apparent effort. Their gratitude draws opportunities, helpers, and circumstances that align with their state of abundance. When you begin to live in this way, you notice subtle shifts almost immediately. The heaviness you once felt about money begins to lift. You find yourself more at ease, more confident, more willing to give and to act boldly. This new inner atmosphere is itself a form of wealth, and soon it attracts outer wealth to match. Inner speech and gratitude work together to create this atmosphere. They shift your inner climate from drought to rainfall, and once the rain begins, the harvest cannot be far behind. To act as if you are wealthy, therefore, is to master the art of inner conversation and to live in continual gratitude. It is to speak within as one who already possesses and to give thanks before evidence appears. This is not play acting but the genuine work of creation, for the outer world is only the shadow, and the true command is given in silence, in the private chambers of the mind, where your words echo and take root in the depths of the subconscious. If you want to change your life, change the way you speak within yourself. If you want to multiply your blessings, multiply your thanksgiving. These two practices together have the power to transform lack into abundance, not in some distant tomorrow, but in the unfolding present of your lived experience. Asterisk, do not let appearances rule you, for appearances are only shadows of your past assumptions. What you see with your outer eyes is not reality in its fullest sense. It is only the after effect of what you once imagined and felt to be true. When you learn to detach from appearances, you free yourself from the tyranny of the senses. You realize that bills, debts, shortages, and obstacles are not fixed facts, but temporary reflections of an old state of mind. If you continue to focus on them, you breathe life into them again and again. If you turn away inwardly and assume a new state, the old appearances dissolve because they no longer have support from within. Detachment does not mean neglect or denial. It means refusing to give emotional authority to what contradicts your desired state. If you look at a bank balance that seems low, detachment is the ability to see it without fear, without accepting it as your truth, without making it the measure of your wealth. You acknowledge it as the shadow of an old assumption. Then you shift within yourself to the state of abundance. You refuse to argue with the evidence of lack, because you know the evidence will change as soon as your assumption changes. The world is clay, and the imagination is the potter. The clay does not argue, it takes the shape of the mold. Most people remain bound because they cling emotionally to what they see. They stare at the shadow until it becomes the only truth they recognize. They repeat to themselves that nothing is changing, that the evidence is against them, that they are stuck. In doing so, they anchor themselves to the very condition they want to escape. Detachment is the art of loosening this grip. It is the quiet refusal to be swayed by appearances, the inner discipline to look beyond the shadow to the reality you are creating. It is the willingness to let go of the old picture, even while it still lingers in view, knowing that a new picture will replace it if you persist in assuming it. This practice requires faith, but not the kind of faith that is blind or desperate. It requires the faith that understands the law. You do not need to see the harvest immediately to believe in the seed. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up each day to check if it is growing. You trust the process. Detachment is the same trust applied to your inner work. You have planted the seed of wealth in imagination. The old evidence of lack may still be visible, but you no longer feed it with emotion. You turn instead to the certainty of your inner assumption, and in time the outer shadow must give way. When you detach from appearances, you begin to notice how fleeting they truly are. The very bill that once frightened you is soon paid and forgotten. The debt that seemed overwhelming is eventually cleared. The shortage that felt permanent passes like a cloud. These things are never fixed. They are only temporary states given form by your assumption. If you withdraw belief from them, they must fade. If you continue to sustain belief in your new state, it must appear. The outer world has no choice but to reflect your inner persistence. Asterisk, to live as though is to embody your desired state in thought, in feeling, and in action as naturally as possible. It is not about pretending for the sake of others, but about convincing yourself inwardly that what you seek is already real. If you want wealth, then let your mind, your words, and your actions be colored by the assumption of wealth. Walk into each day as if abundance surrounds you. Speak inwardly as one who already has. Make choices as one who is secure, not one who is lacking. This alignment of inner and outer behavior cements the assumption in your subconscious. Living as though does not require you to spend recklessly or act in ways that put you at risk. It requires that you adopt the attitude and feeling that wealth brings. If you were already wealthy, would you live in fear of every small expense? Would you shrink from opportunities because you doubted your worth? Or would you act calmly, confidently, generously? Begin to act in this manner now, not recklessly, but faithfully. Pay your bills with gratitude instead of resentment. Share what you have, however small, with the ease of one who knows more is always flowing in. Approach opportunities as though you have the means and ability to succeed. This is how you live from the state of wealth before it appears. The power of living as though lies in the fact that the subconscious cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. If you consistently act, feel, and think as if something is true, the subconscious accepts it as fact and sets out to bring it into manifestation. By living as though you are wealthy, you instruct your subconscious that wealth is already your reality. The outer world, obedient to this instruction, rearranges itself to match. Consider how children play. When a child acts as though he is a king or a hero, he does not doubt the game. In his imagination, he fully inhabits the role. His words, his gestures, his feelings all align with the character he has assumed. He experiences genuine joy and power because he has stepped into the state completely. Adults often lose this natural capacity, dismissing it as mere pretending. Yet creation itself is rooted in this very ability. To live as though is not to pretend falsely, but to engage the same creative faculty children use with ease, applying it consciously to shape reality. Living as though also dissolves the sense of waiting. Many people keep their desires perpetually in the future. They say one day I will be wealthy, one day things will improve, but by always placing the state in tomorrow, they never experience it today. To live as though is to collapse that distance. It is to claim now what you once postponed. It is to bring the end into the present and dwell in it. This shift is subtle but transformative, for life always responds to your present assumption, not to a promise of future change. If you struggle to embody this practice, start small. Ask yourself in any given situation, what would I do if I were already wealthy? If you are deciding how to respond to an opportunity, how would the wealthy version of me respond? If you are thinking about your goals, what would I assume if wealth were already secure? By repeatedly stepping into this role, you begin to dissolve the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Eventually, the state of wealth feels so natural that it no longer feels like acting. It becomes your identity, and once it is your identity, the outer world must mirror it. Living as though requires persistence, for the old state will try to reassert itself. You may be tempted to slip back into thoughts of lack, to argue with appearances, to let fear rule your choices. But each time you notice this and return to the state of wealth, you strengthen it. Over time, the balance shifts. The wealthy assumption becomes dominant, and the old state loses its power. This persistence is the price of transformation, but it is a small price compared to the reward. When you combine detachment from appearances with the practice of living as though, you master the art of creation. You refuse to be ruled by the old shadows, and you fully inhabit the new state. You turn away from what contradicts your desire, and you turn inwardly toward the reality you have chosen. You do not wait for proof before living it. You live it now and let the proof follow. This is how all great changes are made, not by fighting the old but by embodying the new. To detach from lack and to live as though abundance is already yours, is to stand in the place of quiet power. You no longer react to every shift of the outer world. You no longer beg life to change. You realize you are the cause, and the outer world is the effect. By controlling your inner state, you control the outer results. This is the essence of acting as if you are wealthy. It is not wishful thinking, not shallow pretending, but the deliberate assumption of a new identity until the outer world cannot help but conform to it.